The storm outside the Marlowe mansion had been building all afternoon, but inside, the true tension came from people, hurried voices echoing across marble halls, the sound of doors opening and closing, and the low hum of unease that seemed to settle into the air itself. At the top of the grand staircase, servants moved quickly under the orders of men in white coats. Richard Marlowe stood in the hallway, his usually composed face tight with frustration. The most powerful businessman in Chicago, a man whose influence reached far beyond the boardroom, now found himself surrounded by experts who had no answers. He hated uncertainty more than anything. And today, the uncertainty lived under his own roof. "Nothing changes," one of the doctors murmured, his voice low but firm. "We're monitoring closely." Richard's sharp gaze cut through him. "Monitoring isn't fixing." Downstairs, the air smelled faintly of rain and polished wood. Emma Gray, a young waitress from a small cafe in the city, arrived with a paper bag of meals for the household staff. It was supposed to be a quick delivery, in and out. But something felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. The atmosphere was heavy, like the mansion itself was holding its breath. She set the bag down near the kitchen door, ready to leave, when raised voices drifted from upstairs. Panic, commands, footsteps. Someone dropped a tray that clattered like thunder on tile. Without thinking, Emma followed the sound. Up the curved staircase, through the long corridor, past men who didn't even seem to notice her in their rush. When she reached the open door at the end of the hall, she froze. Inside, several people hovered anxiously around a boy lying quietly on the bed, pale, motionless but not gone, his breathing shallow, eyes closed as if asleep. Machines surrounded him, their quiet rhythm breaking the silence. "Someone, get more," a nurse started, but stopped when she saw Emma in the doorway. Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Let me help." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, from behind them, Richard Marlowe turned. His gaze, sharp as a blade, met hers. He didn't recognize her uniform, didn't care who she was, only that she'd spoken with confidence when everyone else hesitated. And for reasons even he couldn't explain, he said quietly, "Then help." The room was unnaturally still, the kind of silence that made every whisper sound louder. Emma stepped closer, her shoes sinking slightly into the thick carpet, her heart drumming in her ears. Everyone's eyes were on her, but she focused only on the boy. His small hand rested limply on the blanket, his face calm, peaceful, too pale for comfort. She didn't know what she could possibly do, but she had always believed that stillness could be broken by kindness. "Can someone bring warm water?" she asked, her tone gentle but firm. "And a clean towel." One of the nurses blinked at her, hesitating. Richard's voice broke the momentary paralysis. "Do it." The staff moved at once. Within moments, Emma had what she asked for, a bowl of steaming water, a towel, and a small wooden box she always carried in her delivery bag, filled with simple herbs she used for headaches and nerves. Her grandmother's habit. She mixed a few drops into the water, their faint scent of rosemary and lavender spreading through the tense air. The fragrance felt out of place among the sharp smells of polished metal and fear. "Just something to help him breathe easier," she murmured, half to herself. As she dabbed the cloth and gently brushed it across the boy's temples, Richard watched in silence. Her movements were steady, careful, the kind of calm that couldn't be faked. Minutes passed. Slowly, the heaviness in the room seemed to ease. The boy's breathing deepened, his color softening back toward life. No one spoke. The doctors looked at each other, unsure what to make of it, but Richard didn't need explanations. He'd spent weeks surrounded by professionals who offered theories and excuses. This girl, this stranger, had walked in and done something none of them could. She'd changed the air itself. "What did you do?" he asked finally. Emma looked up, startled by the question. "Nothing special," she said quietly. "Just a little warmth." For a moment, the storm outside seemed to fade into a distant whisper. Richard turned toward the window, his reflection merging with the rain-slicked glass. When he spoke again, his tone carried something new, not command, but curiosity. "What's your name?" "Emma Gray." He nodded slowly, repeating it under his breath as if testing how it sounded in his world, a world of power, secrecy, and men who obeyed orders without question. A world where warmth was rare. And for the first time in years, Richard Marlowe felt something unfamiliar, the faint pull of hope. By morning, the mansion felt different. The constant movement of doctors had slowed, replaced by a quieter kind of vigilance. Richard's son was resting peacefully now, his breathing steady, the color returned to his cheeks. No one could explain it, yet no one dared to question it either. Emma sat near the window, the faint aroma of the herbs still lingering in the air. She'd planned to leave right after sunrise, but when she rose to go, Richard stopped her with a single word. "Stay." It wasn't a request. Yet there was something behind it, not threat, but intent. He studied her as if she were a puzzle he hadn't decided how to solve. "You noticed something last night," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" Emma hesitated. She'd spent years serving coffee to tired strangers, learning to read people by their eyes and tone. And there was something in this house, not illness, not accident, but unease. "The boy," she began carefully, "he seemed calm until you brought in the food tray. After that." She didn't finish. Richard's expression sharpened, a flicker of realization crossing his face. "You think it's something here? Something he's given?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice low. "But if you trust me, I can watch. See what happens." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned toward the window, his reflection outlined against the gray morning light. "I've spent my life knowing exactly who to trust," he said finally. And yet, he glanced back at her. "Here you are, a stranger who sees what others don't." He nodded once, as if settling something within himself. "You'll stay in the East Wing. I want you to observe everything. No one needs to know why." Emma's breath caught. "You're asking me to..." "To help," Richard interrupted, his tone softer now. "Until I know who's behind this." That word, "who," made her skin prickle. Because in a house this large, filled with polished surfaces and polite smiles, she could already feel the weight of eyes following her. That night, as the rain returned and the lights dimmed across the mansion, Emma stood by her window, watching the dark garden below. She had come here to deliver lunch, nothing more. But now, she was part of something far more dangerous, and she wasn't sure if she could still walk away. Days passed, but the sense of unease in the Marlowe mansion only deepened. The staff spoke in hushed tones, footsteps echoed like secrets, and doors seemed to close just a second too soon whenever Emma walked by. She tried to blend in, helping the housekeeper, checking the boys' room, keeping her voice soft and her eyes open. Yet every corridor whispered that she didn't belong. Richard was gone most of the time, taking urgent calls behind closed doors, his voice low and sharp. But when he did appear, his presence filled the air, controlled, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Report," he'd say simply. "There's something odd," Emma told him one morning. "The boy eats very little, but after meals, he always looks weaker." Richard frowned, his hand tightening around the edge of his desk. "You're sure?" She nodded. I saw it twice. That evening, she stayed in the kitchen under the pretense of helping with dishes. The kitchen was enormous, black marble counters, gleaming appliances, everything spotless. Yet the atmosphere was anything but calm. The chef avoided her gaze, and one of the maids suddenly remembered something urgent in another room. Only one man seemed completely at ease, Tony Blake, Richard's longtime associate. He was charming in the way some men are when they know no one dares to refuse them. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing a gold watch that caught the light as he stirred something into a small glass vial. Emma pretended to wipe the counter near him, her heart steady but alert. "What's that?" she asked lightly. Tony smiled without looking at her. "Just a supplement. Vitamins for the kid. Keeps him strong." The words should have sounded harmless. They didn't. Later that night, when Emma brought the tray upstairs, she hesitated at the door. The boy was sitting up, quietly playing with a small wooden airplane. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You're nice," he said softly. Her heart ached a little at that, because she could already feel that someone here wasn't. After he finished his meal, Emma lingered by the window, pretending to adjust the curtains. Within minutes, the boy's small shoulders drooped, his eyes dimmed with exhaustion. Her pulse quickened. Downstairs, she found Richard in his study, the room lit only by the glow of the fireplace. He didn't look surprised to see her, as if he'd been expecting news. "It's after dinner," she said quietly. And it happened again. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then Richard stood, his expression carved from stone. "I want you to keep watching," he said. "Don't trust anyone, not even the ones who seem loyal." Emma hesitated. "That includes your right hand?" Richard's eyes met hers, dark, unreadable. "In this house," he said slowly, "loyalty is a word people wear like perfume. It fades fast when things get dangerous." Outside, thunder rolled over the hills, low and distant. Inside, Emma understood, she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was walking straight into the heart of someone else's secret, one that could shatter everything if she uncovered it. The house slept lightly. In the long corridors of the Marlowe estate, silence had weight, a heavy, listening kind of silence that made every footstep sound louder than it should. Emma moved through it like a shadow, her breath shallow, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She had waited until nearly 2 a.m, when even the guards grew drowsy and the lights dimmed to a faint golden haze along the walls. From her small room in the east wing, she could see the kitchen lights flickering below. Someone had been there after midnight, she'd heard the soft clink of glass, the hum of the refrigerator door opening and closing. Now, barefoot, she followed the faint trail of sound. The kitchen, usually immaculate, looked different at night. The polished counters gleamed in the half-light from the security lamps outside. Shadows stretched long and narrow across the tiled floor. The air smelled faintly of metal and citrus, too clean, almost sterile. Emma paused at the threshold, listening. Nothing. Then her eyes caught a detail, one of the cabinets on the far wall, Tony's personal storage, the one no one ever touched, stood slightly ajar. Earlier that day, she'd seen him lock it with a small brass key he kept on a chain around his neck. Her heart quickened. She crossed the room quietly, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of the counter. The cabinet was heavy oak, polished, precise. When she eased it open, the hinges made the faintest groan. Inside were rows of neatly arranged containers, herbs, spices, jars of powders, each labeled in Tony's precise handwriting. The organization was almost obsessive. But one jar drew her attention immediately. Organic cocoa powder. It looked ordinary, but when she lifted the lid, a sharp, chemical scent hit her. It was wrong. The texture was uneven, the color slightly off, and under the pale light she saw tiny greenish flecks glinting among the brown. Emma's pulse hammered. She dipped a spoon lightly, lifting a small pinch to the light. Whatever this was, it wasn't cocoa. Instinctively, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. The soft click of the camera shutter seemed deafening in the quiet kitchen. She took several photos quickly, capturing the label, the powder, the shelf. Then she set everything back exactly as it was. When she turned, her reflection startled her, pale, wide-eyed in the glass of the oven door. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. She'd done what she came for. Now she just needed to leave. She was halfway to the door when she heard it, the faint creak of a floorboard in the hallway beyond. Emma froze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching the kitchen. She glanced around frantically, her eyes landing on a rolling cart stacked with linens near the pantry door. Without thinking, she ducked behind it, crouching low, pressing herself against the wall. The footsteps drew closer, steady, confident, the stride of someone who didn't need to hide. The door swung open. Tony Blake stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. Even at this hour, his shirt was pressed, sleeves rolled up, hair slicked back. He moved with unhurried precision, crossing to the cabinet, the same one she'd just closed. Emma held her breath. He checked the lock, fingers tracing the metal, then the counter, the shelf, as if he knew something had been disturbed but couldn't prove it. His expression remained calm, but his jaw was tight. He poured himself a glass of water, then leaned against the counter, staring into the dark window. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to anyone in the room. People in this house don't know when to mind their business. The words were soft, but they crawled up her spine like ice. After a long pause, he left, the echo of his shoes fading into the corridor. Emma stayed hidden until she was sure he was gone. When she finally slipped back to her room, dawn was already brushing the edges of the horizon, painting the mansion in gray-blue light. She sat on her bed, hands shaking as she scrolled through the photos she'd taken. Each image confirmed the truth she hadn't wanted to believe. Tony, the man Richard trusted more than anyone, was adding something to the boys' meals. Something that didn't belong there. But why? Her thoughts tangled with fear and disbelief. Tony's loyalty to Richard was legendary. Stories whispered among staff painted him as the man who had saved Marlowe's life more than once. To betray that kind of trust wasn't just dangerous, it was unthinkable. Unless, she realized, the betrayal didn't come from greed or rivalry, but from someone's order. Someone even higher. The idea chilled her. When she finally managed to lie down, the mansion had begun to stir again, servants preparing for the day, voices echoing faintly through the hall. But Emma couldn't close her eyes. Every sound felt sharper, every face less trustworthy. Somewhere below, in the kitchen she had just left, Tony would notice soon enough that someone had been there. And when he did, he would know exactly who. By dusk, the Marlowe mansion was polished to perfection, chandeliers glowing, silver gleaming, the illusion of peace restored. Richard had announced a small dinner to celebrate his son's recovery. Yet beneath the luxury, the air pulsed with unease. Emma watched from the kitchen doorway. Servants moved briskly, whispering. At the counter, Tony Blake inspected the evening's preparations, his sleeves rolled up, smile sharp. "Big night," he said lightly. "Mr. Marlowe likes to celebrate victories." "Do you?" she asked. His gaze lingered. Depends on who's still standing when it's over. When he turned away, Emma noticed the familiar vial near his tray. The same one she'd seen hidden before. Her chest tightened, she had only one chance to expose him. At 7, the guests gathered. The long table shimmered under soft light. Richard sat at the head, his son beside him, Tony to his right. Emma moved silently among them, serving wine and food with practiced calm. When the final dish was placed, she spoke softly. "Mr. Marlowe, may I offer a small family tradition? An herbal toast for good fortune." Surprised, Richard arched a brow but nodded. "Go ahead." She prepared the glasses herself, pouring carefully. But in Tony's drink, she added a few drops of the powder she'd photographed the night before. Just enough to make a point. When the glasses were filled, Richard raised his own. "To loyalty," he said. The crystal rang across the table. At first, everything seemed normal: laughter, conversation, clinking silver. Then Tony paused mid-sentence. A bead of sweat formed on his temple. He swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. Richard's brow furrowed. "Tony?" Tony's hand trembled as he set down his fork. His voice was strained, barely controlled. I don't feel," he stopped. His eyes found Emma, and for a heartbeat, recognition flickered, realization. Emma's voice was calm, almost gentle. "That's what you've been giving the boy." The room fell silent. Richard rose slowly, his gaze dark. "What did you say?" Emma met his eyes. "The supplement Tony's been using. It isn't what he claimed. I checked last night." She held up the small vial. "It weakens, not heals." The guests shifted uneasily. Tony's composure cracked, he pushed back his chair, but Richard's tone froze him in place. "You've been at my side 10 years, he said. "Explain." Tony's voice broke. "It wasn't me. I only followed orders." "Whose?" No answer. Only silence thick as glass. Richard's expression hardened. He looked to Emma, then to the boy, awake now, confused by the tension. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low but steady. "You've done more for my family than people I've known half my life." Emma lowered her eyes. "I just did what anyone would." "No," he said. "Not anyone." The dinner ended quietly. The guests were dismissed. Tony Blake was escorted away without a word, his face unreadable. Later, in the silence that followed, Emma stood by the window, watching rain slide down the glass. She wanted to believe it was over, that the house could finally breathe again. But in the faint reflection of the window, she caught something, a figure beyond the gates, still as stone, watching. When she turned, it was gone. Her heart skipped. Somewhere in the mansion below, a door closed softly, and the sound echoed through the hall like a warning. Whatever had begun here wasn't finished. And Emma knew that the truth, the real truth, was still waiting in the dark. Morning came quietly to the Marlowe estate. The storm had passed, leaving the gardens soaked and shining beneath a pale sun. For the first time in weeks, the mansion seemed to breathe again, the heavy air replaced by calm, almost fragile peace. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, watching as the boy ran across the lawn with a kite, his laughter carried on the wind. He looked free now, brighter, stronger. The sight made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. Richard entered behind her, silent as always. The sunlight caught the faint silver at his temples, softening the edges of his usually unshakable composure. He slept through the night, he said quietly. First time in months. Emma smiled. That's all I wanted. He studied her for a moment, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Gratitude, admiration, and something he didn't dare name. I owe you more than I can ever repay, he said finally. A new home, money, anything you want. She shook her head. I didn't do it for that. Just promise me he'll stay safe. Richard nodded, but his gaze drifted toward the window, to the long driveway where the shadows still lingered beneath the trees. Safe, he repeated softly, as if testing the word's meaning in his world. They stood there in silence, listening to the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started, low, smooth, deliberate. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. Some debts don't disappear, he murmured. Emma looked up at him. Tony? He'll be dealt with, Richard said simply, but there was no satisfaction in his tone. Only caution. And whoever gave him orders won't stop at one failure. For a moment, she saw it clearly, the weight of his life, the network of loyalty and betrayal that surrounded him like invisible glass. I should go, she said softly. Before your world remembers I don't belong in it. Richard turned to her, his expression unreadable. Maybe you belong more than you think. But Emma only smiled, a small, knowing smile, and walked toward the back door, her footsteps light against the marble floor. Outside, the air smelled of wet grass and promise. The boy waved at her from the garden, and she waved back, her heart unexpectedly full. As she reached the gate, a black car rolled past the edge of the property, tinted windows glinting in the sun. She paused, watching it disappear around the bend. Peace, she realized, was never permanent in a house like this. And as she walked down the long road away from the Marlowe mansion, a faint unease lingered, not fear, but awareness. Somewhere, in the spaces between secrets and silence, the story wasn't over. It had only found its breath again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for new Mafia tales every day. And tell us in the comments, which state are you watching from?